Before we get started, I want to make some quick points. Bree, Amos Yee's alleged victim, has stated that she's had hundreds of naked pictures of Amos Yee. We were provided 2 because the police confiscated her phone. I'm going to try and limit the cheap shots in the video at Logicked, who I did reach out to before starting this video, and received no response. I just thought it would be a good idea if he addressed this topic because he has further reach than I do, and he himself expressed that he had some involvement with Amos Yee.
Actually, just one more thing. While I'm thinking about it, I'm sorry. We'll get to it really soon. I just realized that new people are probably really confused why I'm talking like I know you. I mean, it's been quite a while since you were a thing on my channel, so I should probably just give people a brief overview of our history so people know where I'm coming from, because otherwise this video just is lacking so much context. Point a few things out to Amos. It's been a long time. Anyway, I'll make this quick and then we'll get back to it, okay? So, a while back, I was a big supporter of Amos. As a matter of fact, as I understand it, I was one of the people most responsible for bringing him to the attention of the YouTube community. And then later, as he sabotaged his relationship with other YouTubers and became increasingly disliked, I was one of the people who was still most willing to put up with and support him.
Now, quick aside, this is Augie RFC. Sorry for the intro being a little long-winded. He's a younger streamer. He does news, drama. He's 18. You'd expect him to make some mistakes, maybe act a little juvenile. And while he doesn't hold the title Skeptic, TM, but what I and many people respect is effort. But I think the clips speak for themselves.
Removing responsibility of myself. Like I said, I don't think I don't want to beat up on myself or anything like that. But sometimes you just got to correct the situation. You got to man up, admit when you're wrong, and focus on telling the truth, correcting stories. It's a very basic thing to do. Admit that you're wrong. Wow, God, can you believe it? I got something wrong. Can you believe that? Obviously, you got to correct yourself there, which is something many commentators fail to do. I don't know why. It's very easy to correct yourself. I just don't feel like, this show is like the right place, or if I'm the right person to really be, dissecting a story of this magnitude, because obviously I don't want to, break things up. I mean, we did have a caller on the Monday show, I do believe. She's in the DLive chat, by the way. She called in to talk about Amos Yee, allegedly grooming her at the age of 14, it was not a conversation I was prepared to kind of go full in depth. I actually got a bit of criticism for that, simply because, people were like, you barely asked her any questions, or, you missed a chance to kind of get damning info on Amos or whatever. And to that, I just responded, I just don't think I'm the right person to be, pretending to be the police. I mean, that's who I criticize on the internet, is people who are pretending to be, the police, or people who think they have, like, the authority or or what it takes to, solve, like, actual crimes by themselves or whatever. And I'm firmly against that. Oh, no, you don't have to be. So I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying, me personally, like, I just don't feel like I'm in the position to, just be.
So there you go. Failing that logic, I wouldn't want you to think you're just going to ignore this. Hope to hear from you soon.
So, there are a lot of videos out there that have their hot take. And so far, of my videos on Amos Yee, I've bent over backwards not to step on any toes. I've talked to YouTubers such as Augie RFC, Irate, and recently Combat Wombat. And
on that side note, in regards to Combat Wombat, I want to read off the following tweets. But before that, dear Amos, wherever did Combat Wombat ever did get his information from? Hi. So, remember how I asked Kino about his alleged relationship with a 14-year-old? By the way, Amos is going by Kino. I can't imagine why he's trying to rebrand. She just contacted me and has proof of him creeping on her. Here is from a discussion that Combat Wombat posted on Twitter. Hey buddy, hey pal. I know how you said that anyone could debate with you, but when someone offered to debate, you declined because they didn't have enough Twitter followers or clout. It's clear you only want attention. I read your studies and citations. They were theories about the ethics of children giving consent. Also, theories aren't fact, but you pretended they were. Also, I have proof of your inappropriate relationships with a 14-year-old, something you dodged in the stream. Kino, that's Amos. Oh, sorry for responding late, I just noticed this. Dude, you're a public figure as much as I am. I'm sure many people have called on you to want to stream and debate before. Obviously, you can't entertain the hundreds of people who are interested. I'd be perfectly willing to debate someone with a lesser following if they seem cool and reasonable. In fact, I'm thinking about talking with some people with less than 2,000 followers right now. My door's still open, Amos. These studies aren't theories. The sample size is large, the methodology is credible, and I explained why these studies are credible to an extent in the stream, why we did it before, and I'm willing to discuss it with you again at any time if you ever plan another stream on that issue. I'd pay to be there, but I think Combat Wombat actually has all the information that I have, so it wouldn't be necessary. You got set up by being baited into believing that I abused a 14-year-old girl by an anonymous source. No, sir! I beg to differ, Kino. There's nothing anonymous. My name is Anthony Aguilar. I go by FNGR. I emailed you. You never responded. Without context or screenshots and absolute false claims, which if they had actual merit, I would have been arrested already. Well, that's not necessarily true. Y2K Toon Critic from the Bernie fandom wasn't arrested for trying to groom a girl. Kirill the Wolf wasn't arrested for abusing multiple animals. It's taken them 2 to 3 years to finally get off their ass to do anything about Foxler and the furry fandom. The almighty Tora has just recently been arrested, but more often than not, the people online who do terrible things like yourself get away with it, and you know that. With your inability to distinct how one study is credible or not, of course you'd be conned into believing this is an absolute lie about me. Again, I want you to explain, Amos, why a 14-year-old had nudes of you, if you have a reasonable rationale, why they're out there. ProJared was just a thing, and he was able to come forward and give an explanation, so let's hear yours. Let's talk about this really. Let's talk about what this is really about. You're upset that I beat you in the debate on pedophilia. You wanted a map to roast publicly on stream, but instead I won 60 to 40. You could not stand losing, so you personally attacked me by falsely claiming I abused a minor to try and make yourself feel better. Amos, I watched that stream. He was very civil with you. I was trying everything in my power to try and get a hold of Combat, but he was focused on the stream and gave you the respect that one would arguably give to a guest. Which, if it hadn't have been you, you know what, I've been overly civil with some undeserving guests in the past, so I won't judge. I know this is true, otherwise you wouldn't have spent the past 3 days in your YouTube comment section of your debate responding and liking all your fans' comments, insulting me, and saying that you did well in the debate. You didn't. It's kinda weak. From Combat Wombat. That's really funny. 1, you're not a public figure. No one knows who you are. And you're no one. You're a pedophile that everyone thinks is deplorable and want nothing to do with. You declined to debate with someone who wouldn't give you attention. 2, the studies you tout is proving your point. 1 concluded that HIV and sexual risks taking was higher in those who consented to sex when they were young, and that did not prove the ethics of the act at all. The other said that 8-year-olds are able to verbally communicate with adults very well, so somehow you think that proves that you can have sex with them. 3, you are an absolute joke. I have proof that you have sexually harassed a 14-year-old and sent her nudes. You are walking on very fucking thin ice, pal. 4, you didn't beat me in a debate on pedophilia. You lost the second you stepped into the Discord call. I made a fool out of you in front of 2,000 people. You stuttered, got flustered, got silent, and when I questioned you, like when I asked if you would make out with a 4-year-old, per your logic, I have undeniable proof that you have creeped on a 14-year-old and your ass is grass there. I did exactly what I set out to do in that debate, and that was to display how disgusting people like you are to everyone who watched. I did just that. You're a joke, and you'll fade back in obscurity as soon as this stream stops getting views.
I'm not here to get anyone canceled. The idea that Amos Yee was just trolling was a good guess. It was the best educated guess with what information many people had at the time.
Welcome to America, Amos. I'm glad they finally let you out of detention. 10 months. I mean, I gotta say that seems a little bit excessive just to figure out if your treatment in Singapore counted as political persecution or not. And I'm genuinely glad that you're not going to be persecuted for speaking your mind anymore. Maybe it was worth the price. Now you don't have to be afraid to go into jail, no matter how many people get annoyed at you. And a lot of people are already annoyed at you. And now if all the people in your city or your state start hating you too much, you can just move. I'm familiar with your work, and I've spoken with you directly enough times that when you decide that you're going to pick this video of all of your options to be your very first real video, well, I gotta say, it just kind of comes off as lazy trolling. Or maybe not lazy exactly, but at least predictable. Cliche.
Recently, a girl whose alias is Bree has come forward, and I quote, "She's had hundreds," as in plural, hundreds of nude pictures of Amos Yee.
Bit of a problem. When all your fame and all your infamy rests entirely on being the biggest edgelord in your entire country, but your country is so non-edgy that just mocking the government and a couple religions gets you tossed in jail, well, when you move to America, you gotta get nervous, you know? The only reason anyone knows who you are isn't because you annoyed people, it's because you annoyed people until the government started treating you unfairly. And the government in the USA is not going to throw you in jail for saying dumbass things. You can certainly go around and just annoy random people. You can get Andy Worski and Jeff Holiday to make videos about you, but anyone can do that. They make videos about all kinds of people on a regular basis. They need content. It's just not very impressive, is it? But what is impressive is getting invited to speak at Harvard. Wow, that's a real ticket to success. And even more impressive is getting your talk at Harvard canceled over your past comments in support of legalizing adult-on-baby sex. You probably feel like them canceling you is just like them handing you a golden ticket and sending you off on your way to the chocolate.
Bree, the girl with hundreds of nude pictures, is 14. Now, I have some censored images here. The original hundreds of images have been handed off to the police. This is what is left. Hopefully I'll have a couple by the time that this goes live. I have two to address this matter. Oh, on that topic, this is Combat Wombat. He recently debated Amos Yee. Regretfully, I found out about it while I was at work, and I was a little late to get a hold of Combat Wombat, who his entire, or at least significant portion of his modding staff, and then him after the stream, were able to sit down and have a discussion about this. Combat Wombat said in call that he wished he had these screenshots during the debate. I assured him I wanted him to have a communication with Bree, that's the victim, but wires must have gotten crossed on Twitter. He wasn't entirely checking his messages during the stream, but credit it where credit is due. As soon as he could, he and his staff removed anyone associated with Amos from Combat Wombat's Discord that Bree was able to help point out. Wombat tweeted out about the topic shortly thereafter. And while I didn't really find out till Monday that Bree had so many images, had so many nude pictures of Amos, we did get that information because Wombat's staff rose to the occasion. One brave soul said that he was willing to see Amos nude, something I wasn't willing to do, well, sadly till recently. And yes, these are nudes of Amos. The question now is, Amos, how or why does a 14-year-old have so many, or had so many nude pictures of you?
Deadly serious about every issue he raises. Ever since I first brought you to people's attention, that's been an ever-present sentiment people have presented to me. And to a very limited extent, I think that you do in fact mean what you say, but it's crystal clear that the way you pick your issues and the way that you frame them is done with the intention of being as inflammatory as you possibly can. The thing is that you're this extreme hardcore anarchist type who thinks that there should be as few laws as possible to restrict the actions that people can choose to perform. The only laws that you seem to think outweigh the cost to freedom are the ones that forbid direct, immediate, demonstrable physical harm. And as a result, you could pretty much talk about anything and have it suit that narrative. If you're worried about the freedom of kids to do as they please, including fucking adults, you could choose to talk about how kids aren't allowed to drink, smoke, drive, get piercings or tattoos, credit cards, fight in wars, sign contracts, get married, buy guns, vote, serve on juries, donate blood, skydive, write checks, gamble, get jobs. I've heard you say that you disagree with at least some of these, and I'm guessing you probably disagree with most.
Now, I can't climb inside of Amos Yee's head. Now, was there a time when Amos Yee was quote-unquote doing this as a troll? Did Amos Yee run a con about fucking kids so long and so far that he lost sight of reality and went on to live his gimmick? That certainly is an interesting hypothesis. Freedom of speech is unbelievably important. It is something worth fighting for. Maybe even worth dying for. There's a counter-argument to that, though.
I'm an advocate for freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Okay, there are of course exceptions to the rule. You know, you can't advocate for violence or terrorism, or you can't really libel or slander people. You know, you can be sued for that kind of thing. And there are some people who believe letting these people make those arguments, and of course those people making those arguments, is a matter of freedom of speech, and therefore they shouldn't be flagged off of YouTube or Twitter or anything like this. This is wrong. This is not correct. This is not correct. If you advocate for sexual relationships with children, from adult to child, that is not freedom of speech. That is not protected under freedom of speech and expression. That is advocacy for harm. There is evidence to suggest that the vast majority of kids, whether it doesn't matter whether they're 4, 8, or even as old as 14 or 15, they will suffer from some kind of severe mental trauma.
Now, some of you might notice that this doesn't include a primary source, so I went with one of Irate Bear's links. That's Irate Alex. I thought I would read that off here. Baltimore MD, August 23rd, 2011. Pro-family advocates who attended a controversial pro-pedophilia conference in Baltimore last week say that they were profoundly shaken by what they saw and heard. As a former law enforcement officer, I have dealt with situations involving suicide, homicide, and other violence. That said, I've never felt the level of spiritual oppression and evil that I felt in that room, though I think that there's some skeptics out there that might take umbrage and offense with such spiritual talk. Their logic. They're mental health professions and self-described pedophiles and gay activists who were inexplicably able to cavalierly discuss in almost dismissive way the idea of child rape, Barbara said. They used flowery, euphoric psychobabble to give quasi-scientific cover to a discussion about the worst kind of perversion. The organization, B4U, ACT, sponsored the event in Baltimore last week, which was attended by pro-pedophilia activists and mental health professionals. The conference examined the way in which minor attracted persons, that's MAP, could be involved in a revision of American Psychological Association, the APA's classification of pedophilia. The conference panelists included Fred Berlin of Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, Renee Sorrentino, I'm going to include the name on screen here in case I botched this horribly, of Harvard Medical School, and John Sadler of University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, and John Breeslow of London School of Economics and Political Science. Speakers addressed the around 50 individuals in attendance on the theme ranging from the notion that pedophiles are unfairly stigmatized and demonized by society to the idea that children are not inherently unable to consent to sex with an adult. Also, just for the record here, if I start to drone on here, I do not believe that children should consent. I would not, no matter what other scientific evidence you brought to me, I would disagree strongly with every fiber of my being. Continuing on. Also discussing where the argument that an adult's desire to have sex with a child is normative in the APA's Diagnosis and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, ignores the fact that pedophiles have feelings of love and romance for children in the same way adult heterosexuals and homosexuals have romantic feelings for one another. An interview with the LifeSite News. Liberty University visiting professors of law Judith Raisman, it'll be on screen, who attended the conference, said that the post-landmark Lawrence v. Texas decision in 2003, paraphrasing Justin Anthony Scalia, everything goes. I go into detail on this in my last book, Sexual Sabotage, she said, following the Alfred Kinsley sexologist that began to occupy our schools, so that educated professionals have largely been trained to be a form of sexual anarchists. All throughout the stupidity of advocating harmless, amoral sexual overwhelming us daily, our arrogant, educated populations say morality has no place in our sex lives, Raisman said. Just as AIDS is a natural overgrowth of amoral sexual education in media, so too is child sexual abuse. We are breeding a new human character, and child sexual abuse is increasingly a part of that character. I, for one, have had enough, Barbara told LifeSite News. That's where this citation comes from. These sexual anarchists, whatever their perverse stripe, need to leave our children alone and let kids be kids. They know to own the future. They must own the minds of our children, he said. Hence groups like B4U ACT, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, Planned Parenthood, and the like utilize academia from preschool to postgraduate in order to brainwash and indoctrinate, as previously reported by the LSN B4 B4U Act classified pedophilia as simply another sexual orientation and decries the stigma attached to pedophilia. B4U's Act Science Director Howard Klein has criticized the definition of pedophilia by the American Psychological Association, describing its treatment of minor attracted persons as inaccurate and misleading. Similar lobbying then by the homosexual activists led to the declassification of homosexuality as a mental disorder in 1973 in the DSM. As a result of the DSM's declassification and debate regarding homosexuality and the many documented harms and associations with homosexual lifestyle has been all but shut down in academic psychological circles. I'm not a doctor. I am not the king of debate. I don't expect if I got into a stream with Logicked, even if I was objectively right, I'd be able to win the argument with someone who does this for a living. I'm not a skeptic TM. And I don't think I could if Logicked insisted he was right and he didn't want to do anything. There isn't much I'd be able to say or do. Logic, you nearly have 120,000 views on your video. I think I've provided enough information that perhaps you'd consider addressing this topic again. It was a fair assumption that Amos was just a troll, but correcting that so that your audience can be informed might be a good idea. Just a thought.
Talent, by the way. You're pretty good at delivering provocative comments just deadpan enough to make most people buy it. I mean, you haven't refined it to an art yet. If people carefully watch your face when you're talking about this stuff, they'll probably notice that the mask slips kind of regularly and all that's really underneath is a big old grinning troll face. But it doesn't make much difference, because by the time that happens, your opponent and the average viewer and everyone are all so completely flustered that they're not paying attention to what you're actually doing. Now that you're a free man, I think that if people were thinking clearly, we'd all just write you off as the pathetic, attention-thirsty moron that you are, and choose to respond to something else instead. But I think it'll probably take a couple months for that to sink in. Now, of course, I'm no mind reader. I don't make any claim to having supernatural abilities, at least not during work hours. Maybe I'm completely off on all of this, despite you directly telling me more than once that your goal is to fuck.
I understand you're making this even-handed enough to give your ability to walk this back, but you straight up winked at your audience and said, I Logicked, and call you with an air of first-hand experience that Amos Yee is fucking with you.
So, a while back, I was a big supporter of Amos. As a matter of fact, as I understand it, I was one of the people most responsible for bringing him to the attention of the YouTube community. And then later, as he sabotaged his relationship with other YouTubers and became increasingly disliked, I was one of the people who was still most willing to put up with and support him. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me go back a bit. So, back in the day, when Amos was charged with blasphemy the second time, when he was like 17, I really felt like his case was not getting enough exposure outside of Singapore and maybe other Eastern countries like China. He really was not getting much notice on YouTube, so I tried to inform people about his case, and I was under no illusion about our potential to affect the actual result of the case, but I figured at least it would make sense to bring the state of Singaporean free speech to the attention of a few more people around the world, because issues don't get fixed if nobody knows about them. And my efforts worked a lot better than I expected. A lot of people took notice. People made videos about Amos, people live streamed with him. He got on the Rubin Report and made a complete ass of himself. I think I was right to try to bring attention to his story, and I would do it again because it was an important issue. I don't think that people should be persecuted by governments for their speech. Of course, Amos inevitably chose to set fire to every single bridge that I or anyone else helped him find, but that was only to be expected from the world's edgiest ultra-troll.
If I'm misunderstanding, by all means, reply in the comments down below or elsewhere. Now, this is a tricky question. If someone intended behind their words, their intent is to go after kids, should the language be allowed? In fact, Logic, if you had this information, if I may be so bold, you might have found something else to do with your time if you knew that this is what Amos was getting up to.
To me, would feel like the equivalent of giving up on pointing out his right to speak his mind and just letting the Singapore government have its way for no reason other than that he spoke his mind in a way that I didn't like. I was happy that people were forcefully arguing against his position, but there's a difference between that and just ceasing to care about the legal case in and of itself, and to me, that seemed really hypocritical for free speech advocates. I was also really determined to try to stay as objective as I could about what it was that he was actually saying. Back then, just like now, a lot of people, instead of taking Amos's words as an expression of a principled stance, or even just of his own self-perception of being trolly McTrollface, and then arguing against his position, they just leapt to calling him a pedophile or a child rapist, and I completely disagreed with that then, and I still do. I don't see anything inconsistent with someone trying to make a moral argument about an activity that they don't have any personal interest in, even if I don't find their argument particularly moral.
I'm really done some thinking about Irate Alex or Irate Bear's perspective, and personally, why I can't say if the discussion itself will or won't cause imminent harm. It's not a hill I'd want to die on. I do understand as human beings that we should make an effort to be as consistent as possible with our values. That's something to be respected. But logic. Maybe if you knew or perceived that Amos was just fucking around, maybe you should have bowed out. Wow, I have better shit to do with my time. I know hindsight is 20/20, and struggling to do the right thing even when it's unpleasant, and to prove your character and how you feel about your principles should be honored and celebrated. I think people would have forgave you if you would have coughed, hiccuped, or flubbed about this time when it came to backing someone up like Amos.
Reminded me of years ago when I would express my support of changing the law in favor of gay rights, and then people would question my sexuality just because of that. Now, obviously, kitty fucking is not remotely in the same ballpark as homosexuality morally. Do not even try to pretend like I'm making a moral equivalence. But the same kind of logical fallacy applies when you call Amos a kitty fucker or a pedophile because he's arguing to change the law in favor of kitty fuckers and pedophiles, instead of based on evidence that he actually fucks kids or wants to.
Wow, that's not going to age well. Considering your only example in this case is Amos. In fact, I'm pretty sure Amos is gonna ruin any hope of anyone attempting to do that without thinking that there's some kind of ulterior motive in this case. And to be honest, Logic, I don't see the downside in this case. Yeah, I got the example you went with on gay rights. But here's the thing. If Amos's argument loses, even spectacularly, what's the downside? If Amos Yee's mighty crusade ends up ruining him, maybe because he breathed in his own insanity one too many times. It's not like gay rights are magically going to get rolled back. If someone like Amos Yee uses and abuses freedom of speech so horrifically, so after being propped up so high, it would open up the door for critics against that philosophy. Logic. Free speech is good, I agree, but maybe this wasn't the best way to prove it. And you said yourself, I'd do it again. Maybe really think that through next time. Maybe if you would have had sidestepped them originally, you wouldn't have had to deal with listening to my crazy ass asking you to disavow this stance.
Find stupid and dangerous, or even ones that actually are stupid and dangerous. Besides which, I don't have any inherent problem with people bringing up questions about why we should and shouldn't have particular laws, regardless of what those laws are for and regardless of how necessary I believe them to be. I would feel the same way if he was arguing against murder laws. Worst case, it creates a conversation about why we have those laws, and I think it's generally a good thing if our society can remember the reasoning behind the laws we enforce instead of just remembering the law.
Thing is, if Amos was just some high-minded philosopher challenging the world on why we have these laws, wait a minute. So you don't mind if anyone challenged freedom of speech, right? I mean, considering backing Amos certainly is going to do that. We'll get back to that in a minute. If someone who intended to commit murder was trying to change the laws to make it legal, it might encourage us to tune that guy out just a little faster. Maybe not platform or support or push that narrative. Some might argue this is exactly the sort of misstep, which is why YouTube is less and less comfortable with the skeptic community that is so in love with impaling itself. See Sargon of Akkad.
I think it depends on the child, really, doesn't it?
Yes! Yes!
Wow, Sergen here really isn't that smart. In your case, Logic, I have faith, even though your videos straight up would argue that such a concept is laughable. But I have faith, blind faith. Maybe you're just a smidge smarter than your fearless leader.
His timeline. But I put my neck out there on principle and openly stated that I thought that people should be on Amos's side regardless of the stupid shit he was saying, and that it's hypocritical to support him on free speech grounds before he says all this nonsense, but not afterwards.
Now, I understand You hammered this into the audience several times by now. It's really hard not to go gotcha, but a 14-year-old has a ton of Amos Yee being nude, and this 14-year-old has allegations about Amos Yee grooming them. I feel comfortable dropping the allegation remark here.
Now, there's no longer any important cause on which I feel any personal need to align myself with you in any way. Now, no matter how ridiculous you get in your attempt to retain those 15 minutes of fame that have already long passed, I can just ignore it. And I will. I'm not going to stay subscribed to your channel. I'm not going to keep following your Twitter. I think your Twitter might even be deleted. Beyond this last tiny charitable scrap of negative attention that I'm giving you right now, I'm not going to have anything to do with you ever again. And I have to say, I find that deeply gratifying, you wretched cunt. This really could not have worked out.
About that, wow, think I'm gonna snap the rug out from you underneath that pretty bad. You're likely gonna have to talk about Amos one more time after this. Who would have thought that Amos Yee's penis would make you look so bad? But let's not make a big thing out of a little thing. Till next time, thank you, fuck you, bye.
Oh, yes. The individualism.
As a matter of fact, as I understand it, I was one of the people most responsible for bringing him to the attention of the YouTube community.